subtly shaking his head as if to say no, and that was my assurance that I knew. That he knew something was off about this lady. Now before I could respond she turned back to Jeff and pointed at me asking if I could take her. Jeff quickly and sternly responded that I was too young to drive. And said there was no way we could help her. I obviously didn't argue with Jeff about his response on my behalf. As to be quite honest, this was completely out of character for him. Jeff was normally friendly and even chatty with the customers. And this further supported the fact that Jeff knew something was off about this lady. The lady, now clearly infuriated, cussed us out and left. As she walked back down the parking lot I kept an eye on her. I noticed she had stopped at the end of the parking lot right next to the interstate itself. I also noticed she was now on a phone call and waited for maybe 2 minutes. When a car pulled up, stopped right next to her and let her in. As if the car was expecting her. The whole situation was weird. Yeah, but I never truly realized how much danger I was actually in that night. Until a while later, almost a year passed. It was night and I was in my bedroom falling asleep as the TV was on in the background. I don't know what channel was on. Possibly some news channel or something. But regardless, something I heard on the TV snapped me wide awake. I sat up to look at the TV. And was greeted with the mugshot of a lady on the screen. As soon as I saw her I immediately knew that was the same lady that I had been in the store with almost a year prior. And who tried to lure either me or my manager to drive her into town. I was 100% sure that was the same woman. It turns out the lady was Eileen Wuornos, who was later convicted of being a serial murderer with a confirmed 7 victims who were all men. Eileen would lure her victims out into the middle of nowhere. And that's where she would shoot them at point-blank range. What disturbs me most is how close I was to becoming one of those victims myself. From both the way she acted in the store and what I now know about her. I firmly believe her plans were to kill either me or my manager Jeff that night. To this day I still have nightmares about what would have happened had we done what she said. Subtly shaking his head as if to say no, and that was my assurance that I knew. That he knew something was off about this lady. Now before I could respond she turned back to Jeff and pointed at me asking if I could take her. Jeff quickly and sternly responded that I was too young to drive. And said there was no way we could help her. I obviously didn't argue with Jeff about his response on my behalf. As to be quite honest, this was completely out of character for him. Jeff was normally friendly and even chatty with the customers. And this further supported the fact that Jeff knew something was off about this lady. The lady, now clearly infuriated, cussed us out and left. As she walked back down the parking. This happened to me and my wife back in the summer of 2017. We had actually only gotten married a few months prior. And obviously because of the wedding cost our financial situation wasn't the best. And this made it so that we could only afford a place to live that was super cheap and that would let us pay week to week. But luckily we were able to find just that in the form of a boarding house in our city. The house was 3 stories and had 4 rooms with a shared kitchen and a bathroom for everyone. We moved into one of the rooms on the 2nd floor. Now obviously with it being a boarding house we had to share with a few other people. The most noteworthy ones being a young couple named Jim and Jennifer just above us in a room on the 3rd floor. And in the 3 months we lived there they were the only neighbors we talked to. They seemed similar to us in both age and interests. But we usually just talked to them in passing or even sometimes on the front porch where we were all out having a cigarette. Though after a few weeks we would quickly realize that they didn't get along too well. It started off with small things like hearing them yell at each other for short durations of time. Or hearing one of them angrily leave the house in some absurd hour of the night. But the short fights didn't last long. They would get only longer and louder as time went on. Though that was until one day my wife and I were watching a movie. And the whole time the usual fights were taking place just above us. But right as the movie ended we both noticed they abruptly stopped. Don't get me wrong, it was nice to finally have peace and quiet. But it was completely out of character for them. I mean, this never happened. They would almost never just abruptly stop yelling at each other. especially at this point in the night. Though even still we both agreed that we should take advantage of the silence and try to go to sleep. And luckily we were able to. But just for me to be woken up in the middle of the night by my wife, who was shaking me and looking off toward the side of our bed. I was tired and completely out of it. I didn't know what time it was or why I was being woken up. Out of habit I turned over to get up. But when I did, I could make out a man standing right next to our bed, hunched over my nightstand, going through the drawer. I was in absolute disbelief. After locking eyes, he stood up from his hunched position and proceeded to just stare at me. I sat up on my bed. And the guy started backing up slowly. I honestly didn't know if what I was seeing was real or just my imagination. But after turning on our room's lamp, I realized it was our upstairs neighbor Jim. The same one who was always yelling and keeping us up late. I was a little relieved, but still, why was he going through our stuff while we were sleeping? It was completely out of character for him. After calming down for a second, I said, "What's up, Jim? What are you doing in our room, man?" After a few seconds of silence, Jim responded by asking if he could borrow our car or if we could take him somewhere. My wife, who was now fully awake, screamed at him no, not after he broke into her room at 3 in the morning. She told him that if he didn't leave, she was going to call the cops. And Jim responded to this by full-on sprinting out of the room. But not just the room. The dude full-on ran out the front door and down the street in a seemingly random direction. I looked at my wife and we both agreed that something was clearly off about the whole situation. We figured at this point we had to go upstairs and check on Jim's wife Jennifer. And so we do. We go upstairs and the first thing we notice is the door to the room was shut. But it wasn't locked. I told my wife we should probably just leave her alone. But she insisted against it, so I reluctantly knocked and shouted the usual hello. After no response, we slowly turned the doorknob and pushed the door open. What we saw next was straight out of a horror movie. The room looked terrible, as if someone had just gone crazy hitting random areas with an axe. That's when we noticed Jennifer lying on the floor face down. We walked over to her thinking that Jim had knocked her unconscious. But as we got closer, we realized there was fresh blood staining the carpet underneath her. In complete horror, we called the cops immediately. We explained to them that we believed we had just walked into a murder scene. But that the murderer himself had already left. The police would tell us to leave the room and wait outside until they arrived. And sure enough, they would arrive not even 5 minutes later. After explaining everything that happened that night, the cops set on a search for Jim. And luckily they were able to find him around an hour later, still running down the street. After further talking with the cops, they said it looked like Jim was trying to find a gas station so that he could get fuel to help him burn the whole house down, with the goal of burning Jennifer's dead body inside. This in turn would remove all evidence connecting him to the murder. Though Jim would ultimately be convicted with the murder of his own wife. For the next couple of days, both me and my wife couldn't leave the house. As every time we tried, we would be swarmed by different news reporters asking us for an interview. Me and my wife would of course move out as soon as we found the funds to do so. But still, the whole thing was insanely terrifying. I mean, in the middle of the night we had unknowingly come face to face with a man who had just murdered his own wife. And who was ultimately planning to murder us in the process of destroying the evidence. This happened 2 years ago when I was working for a very large carpet cleaning company. It's exactly what you'd expect. I'd spend the whole workday going from house to house, completely deep cleaning the residents' carpets with a lot of different tools and machinery. I was 22 and a female. I'm actually pretty sure I was one of the only females working for this company. But at the same time, I really enjoyed it. And if I'm being honest, I was actually really good at the job. So because of this, I was given a lot of work and would usually hit between 6 to 8 houses daily, driving all across multiple towns. This night I was working late, as one of the houses I cleaned earlier in the day took way longer than expected, which of course sent me back the rest of the day. I'd say it was around 7 p.m. when I had one house left to do for the day. Though upon arrival at the given address, I quickly realized it was in the middle of nowhere. And after knocking on the front door, I also realized no one was home. I was annoyed. Yeah, but realistically I was the one that was late for the appointment. I decided to wait until someone came home as I knew I'd get chewed out by my boss if I left without cleaning anything. And luckily 10 minutes later the resident pulled up next to my van. He was a middle-aged man balding wearing dirty shorts and a jacket. He honestly seemed a bit awkward but was apologetic and let me into his house with all my needed equipment. Upon entering I instantly realized the carpet and just the house in general was already unbelievably clean. I mean, it even smelled like cleaning supplies that just been used. To be honest, it was a little weird. I wasn't used to seeing already clean carpets upon arrival. I was genuinely questioning whether me cleaning them would even make a difference. But regardless, I followed protocol and pulled out my company laptop to calculate how much it was going to cost before starting. Hey, do they keep track of where you are on that thing? His question caught me off guard. That was an immediate red flag. After the initial shock from the question, I replied saying that it did and that my boss knew exactly how long each job should take. In reality, this was a complete lie. The laptop was literally just used to run a program that can calculate how much to charge a customer based on the inputted amount of work. But I felt like I had to lie as there was definitely something off about this guy. Regardless, I started cleaning. I just figured the quicker I could clean these carpets and the quicker I could get out of here and call it a day. Fast forward around an hour later and I was finished. I hastily met up with the guy to explain I was done and how much he owed me. But before I could, he interrupted me. He asked me if I could also clean his basement carpet as he forgot to list them when he ordered the service. My heart literally dropped. I just wanted to be done with this and get out of here. But my stupid customer service conditioned brain couldn't figure out how to get away with saying no. The guy led me to his basement door, opened it and gave me a hand signal as if to gesture that I was to go down first. I hesitated, but ultimately I did. Once I got to the bottom, I was horrified. The basement looked horrible compared to the rest of the house. Not only was it unfinished with no carpet whatsoever, but there were clearly 7 deep freezers lining the walls. In the middle of the room was a lit low-hanging ceiling light revealing an old television set. VHS tapes scattered all over the floor and an old recliner facing the TV. Behind the set were 2 white shelves full of VHS tapes. The whole while I'm looking at the basement. The guy is stood at the top of the steps blocking the doorway with a disturbing smile on his face. I looked up at him and said, yeah man, let me go get my stuff. With absolutely no intention of cleaning anything, I just wanted to get out of there. I held my breath and began to walk back up the stairs. The whole while all I could hear was my own heartbeat in my ears. But as I got to about the 3rd stair from the top, the guy was still blocking the door, with still that disturbing smile on his face. I stood there for maybe 20 seconds just looking at the guy, waiting for him to get out of the way. When I swear I could hear footsteps in the basement behind me. Out of pure instinct and adrenaline, without even looking back, I charged towards the guy in front of me. Luckily I was able to break past him, and right as I did I beelined it out of the front door and into my van parked outside. I was leaving thousands of dollars of cleaning equipment behind. But honestly, in that moment I didn't care. I legitimately felt like my life was in danger. As I was pulling away, I glanced back at the house one last time and I saw the same man looking out one of the windows. Now with no smile on his face but rather a cold hard stare. I thought I could see another person, but I honestly don't know. The whole memory is sort of just a blur. The truth of the matter is that my boss would not have noticed I was missing for at least 24 hours when I didn't show up for my shift the next day. The next morning I would call my boss, tell him everything, and ultimately quit that very day. As far as I know, they got the police involved, but I try to distance myself from the whole situation. So I really don't know what ended up happening. I suffered PTSD over this experience. That day still haunts me, and to this day I can't explain what I found in that basement or the sounds of footsteps I thought to have heard behind me. But one thing's for certain, I believe that man and whoever else was there had planned to kill me that night for some sick reason or another.